2 years ago now. And then just a couple months ago, we put in a health strip of native plants in the back that we worked with, tiny scouts. I guess they were second graders. So, and now we have, and there's many more plans to come. So it's terrific. If you haven't already, you should definitely, when you leave here, go to our Native Seeds Library, which is part of the Friends of Westfield Memorial Library, and the Green Team has helped with that. You can get seeds there, and we'd love for you to sign up for our pollinator pathway. If you're in Westfield, we'll put a little butterfly up on your street, but it won't say your name. So we're trying to show where all the native plants are. So without further ado, we are so blessed to have Hazel here with us tonight. Other counties won her, and we're lucky that she came here. She did this presentation a year ago now, right?
Yeah, almost
exactly. Morris County. And she is the Director of Education and Outreach and Land Steward for the Great Swamp Watershed Association. You might know that from the annual plant sale, which Hazel and her team run. And if you don't know about it, you need to know about it, because it'll be coming, I think, April, May 2nd,
April 1st, the sale starts, and normally the first weekend in May is pickup.
Yes, and that has historically been at Brightwood Park for the pickup for people around here. Before joining Great Swamp nearly 20 years ago, she worked for a decade as a naturalist with Somerset County Parks, creating nature history programs for all ages, and as executive director of the White Spot Preservation Trust in the New Jersey Pines. Is that where you met?
It is.
Oh, okay. She is a famous environmentalist couple, her husband as well. Hazel develops and conducts ecological and educationally focused programs for learners of all ages and the broader community. Wow. She manages stewardship at Great Swamp's 75-acre conservation management area. You all should go there. Coordinating restoration at the site. A native of Scotland, she has degrees in zoology and botany and a master's in ecology and environmental management. When not coordinating the Plant for Pollinator program at Great Swamp Watershed, because that's a lot of work, you will find her in her suburban South Plainfield wildflower garden, which is amazing. It's a hot mess, but it's amazing. And
Especially
she also, I will tell you, is an awesome baker. So if you come and volunteer, you will get amazing goodies. Okay, without further ado, Hazel.
Thank you. And I think I have another speaker, so hopefully everybody can hear me. And I apologize if my voice is diminishing. We have been teaching climate change education workshops for students for the last 6 weeks outside every day, and so yelling up against the noise of Route 287, my voice is slowly disappearing. So hopefully it will last. So we gave this program a year ago as a Zoom program, and which I dislike intensely, and I'd much rather see people's faces. So if people have questions, we can take them either as we go, or you can save them to the end. The goal is that you'll leave tonight not totally depressed. It's hard, and eco-anxiety is a real thing. So Great Swamp Watershed Association works on the Passaic River from source to sea. The source of the Passaic is behind Mendham High School, and then through a very circuitous route, the river goes over Patterson Falls, down through Newark and into Newark Bay. And we've been working on water quality issues for 40 plus years, and we got approached this spring from the Department of Education to partner with Ramapo University to offer climate change professional development workshops for teachers. So I've depressed teachers over the summer and then students over the fall. But the reality is that not thinking about solutions to climate change increases the stress. That's what the research is showing. So we know it's real, we know it's bad, we know we need to do something about it, but taking steps towards that can reduce those feelings of like, and that's hopefully the goal for tonight. So we had our series of workshops this summer for grade 6 to 12 teachers, and the first day on the 13th of August, the night before we had 6 inches of rain. Not a hurricane, not a named storm, just New Jersey summer. And so this was my journey home the first day after teaching about climate change all day, heading through the Great Swamp, and the road is flooded, right? And so I think that almost everybody in New Jersey, if you've lived here for more than a few years, has a personal story that connects you to, you know, Snowtober, Hurricane Irene, Hurricane Floyd, or Sandy, or Ida, or the asthma attack that your granddaughter had after the Canadian wildfire smoke came down last year. So climate change is impacting all of us in a myriad different ways, and it can be hard sometimes to stay upbeat. So we'll give you a very quick primer. I'm sure you all know this stuff, but this sort of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about afterwards. So the way I like to think about teaching climate change to students is that, you know, the sun radiates all this energy into the earth, and then some of it bounces back, and the atmosphere holds some of that heat in. And the increasing amounts of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere sort of act like adding extra blankets, so thickening the comforter up, making it really, you know, heavy duty. So what we're, you know, kids often think when you ask them about what's in the atmosphere, they think it's made of oxygen. Oxygen's just small, you know, maybe a fifth. It's heavy into nitrogen, and carbon dioxide, which is the thing that we're going to focus on, is present in the atmosphere, and we know present in the atmosphere at increasing amounts from pre-industrial times. So there is a distressing website that you can go to where you can type in your date of birth, and it will tell you how many parts per million of carbon dioxide there were the day you were born. When I was born, there were 387 parts per million. So since I've been alive, the number of parts per million of carbon dioxide has increased. And we know this from direct observation, we know this from measurement, and we also know this from lots of proxies. My daughter's at college now, and she spent the summer looking at sediment cores from Amazonian lakes from 50,000 years ago. And you can sort of correlate what's happening with bacteria to how warm the temperatures were in that region. We can do the same thing with ice cores. We can do the same thing with rock cores. Scientists all around the world are pretty astute at measuring this increasing amounts of carbon dioxide. And so this is just from 1960 to the present. Most of the graphs that I present are either coming from Rutgers Climate Science Center, our state climatologist, Dave Robinson, who's actually also one of Great Swamp's trustees, or from sources like NOAA. One thing that we've learned in researching all the information for our climate change teacher development is that there's also a lot of misinformation on the web. Oh, surprise. And so when you're looking at data, knowing the source and knowing, you know, that it has the timeline sequentially and not mixed up, which some graphs might want to show a different interpretation. But what we're seeing here is the graph of increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide, you know, and we see that the trend is upward still. So the difficulty is that the impacts of climate change are many and interactive, and so in some places we're going to see warmer temperatures leading to more evaporation, and that might lead to more droughts, whereas in other areas that higher temperature might lead to changing weather patterns that's going to lead to increased amounts of rainfall. And so worldwide, it's a really complicated situation. These models, these mathematical models that we're using to predict future pathways mean that we're giving huge ranges for what could happen in 2050 and 2100, because these different ranges are based on do nothing, do something, do a lot of something, do a huge amount of something, right? And so there's this, huge and complicated system. So many people, including some politicians, have decided that it's better to do nothing, to not think about it. And so, that can be overwhelming as a resident in New Jersey when you feel like this bad thing is happening and there's nothing I can do about it. This is New Jersey's average annual temperature, right? And so what we can see here, New Jersey is unique, not unique. New Jersey is one of the states that has the longest duration of great weather and climate data. We've been collecting daily temperatures and precipitation results since 1885, 95, 85, I think. So we have this huge data set, and there's a great citizen science project that you can participate in, COCO-ROS, which is an acronym, because every good science project needs an acronym.
And no collection sites in Union County.
No collection sites in Union, how is that possible? There's 4 collection sites even in rinky-dink South Plainfield. So you can sign up, you buy a very cheap weather gauge, and you record the precipitation at your site every morning and report into COCO-ROS. For the last month, your reporting has been super easy, right? Trace, trace, trace. But those zeros are important. And so it's from this huge data set that we know that we are currently in a formal drought, but we are also in the period of time in New Jersey's history that is the longest number of days without rainfall. Some places last night had like a spritz. You may almost have needed your windshield wiper. It's exciting. Not in South Plainfield, right? So we have this huge data set, and we can see what's happening with our precipitation and with our average temperature. And so what we can see is that average annual temperature is rising. If you don't look at the sawtooth and you just look at the red line, you can see that the trend is upward. And what we're seeing, if we go sort of deeper in, so this is straight from the state climatologist's website, and Dave Robinson keeps this rolling 12-month average. We're not yet at the end of October. We have one more day, otherwise I could have added October here, because I guarantee that October is going to be a huge red bar. It may be the driest October on record, right? So just like we don't have yearbooks in Scotland where I'm from, but here you have senior yearbook superlatives. New Jersey right now is meeting all of the superlatives, right? It was the wettest December on record last year. The 3rd driest September, the 4th wettest winter, right? And so what we're seeing is these superlatives are clustered, not back in 1895 or 1905, but mostly in the last 2 decades. If we look now, that was for precipitation. So, here's average precipitation and then deviation from average. So very few months are at average. So while if we look at our annual precipitation, we're not seeing a huge change. When we dive into the data, that's why data is the best, right? When we dive into the data, we can see that deviation from average is happening hugely. So we're getting the same annual rainfall, close to, but it's coming in bigger chunks, bigger lumps, right? So here we are with temperature, and again, departure from average. We had the 9th warmest October, 3rd warmest December, 7th warmest July, right? We're having these superlatives. So 4 of the 10 warmest months, 4 of the 10 warmest for their years happened in this 12 months, right? And this keeps on happening. So none of the coldest month superlatives have happened this decade. I think only 1 in the last 2 decades. And we can see that, so don't panic. This is not on the test. That's what I have to say to my students, don't panic. But what this shows, so there's a lot of data here. I just want you to look at color and intensity of color. So the top graph, every vertical line is a decade, right? So we start back here, and it is 1895 we start. So top graph is temperature, and bottom is precipitation. So just look at the color scheme, right? the blues are on the left and the reds are on the right. Sort of appropriate really, right? The blues are on the left. The darker the blue, the more intense, so the cold, the colder, and the darker the red, the more intense, so the warmer. And you can see that all of those superlatives are clustered into these last 2 decades. When we look again at precipitation, it's a little bit more confusing. It's a little bit, there's more noise, there's more variety, but what we can see is there's just more intensity of colors. So these, big storms are happening. These intense storms are happening more frequently, more recently. So what does this mean for New Jersey, right? New Jersey is coastal state, so we're going to see sea level rise. We're actually seeing disproportionate rise in New Jersey sea level. And kids are always like, the sea level is the sea level. It has to be the same around the world. But it really doesn't, because New Jersey is experiencing a couple of different things, partly due to our geology, our glacial history. We're seeing disproportionate sea level rise, also because of ocean currents. We're seeing an increase in severe weather, including more thunderstorms, more hurricanes, more nor'easters, more monsoons, typhoons, whatever you want to call it, and more coastal storms. And so that's sort of in general, but I think since we're at a library, that we should really turn it into sort of a Dr. Seuss book, right? So what we're going to expect is, hotter hots, wetter wets, windier winds, warmer colds, right? The amplitude of what we're seeing is growing. And our storms are getting more frequent, and more frequently they're more intense. So, what we used to call the 100-year storm or the 500-year storm, the 1% storm, is happening more frequently. We're also seeing these rising temperatures, and New Jersey seeing rapidly rising temperatures. We are at the moment about 4 degrees warmer than we were in 1950. We're expected to increase, depending on which model you look at, another 3 to 7 degrees by 2100. That's a lot of Fahrenheit. That's a lot of Fahrenheit, right? The difference to a plant between a couple of degrees is a big difference. So we're seeing this, increase of amplitude, increase of temperatures, increasing precipitation, but coming in bigger and more dramatic forms, and less of the cold, right? Less of the winter. Those, I dressed appropriately in my sandals because it was 76 degrees when I left my house, right? It's the 30th of October. So, if we look, this is my watershed. So you're in the Raritan and the Rahway watersheds. I won't hold that against you. But in the Passaic River watershed, right? So this area right here is Great Swamp. Here's the headwaters of the Passaic River. Has this really weird pathway to the ocean. But if you just look sort of at upstream and downstream, you can immediately see that in this short 80-odd mile long river, there are different issues upstream and downstream. More green space upstream, more built space downstream. And so how climate change is going to impact even a short river like the Passaic, 80 miles is not long by a river's standards. We're going to see differences happening in the north and west and in the northeast of our state, right? Because of the built environment, because of the mountains that we have, and because of the open space that we already have. And so if we take that to Westfield, right? So Rutgers, and I think this talk can go out by email to anybody who's interested. There's a bunch of resources at the end. But Rutgers did an impervious cover assessment of Westfield in 2020. It says it was submitted March 20th, which, maybe that was the first thing they did when we were all on lockdown, but this is an impervious cover assessment, and what it does, it's not important to look at all the micro detail, but red is what they call urban, and in Westfield's in Westfield terms, that urban is mostly what they call medium density housing. So predominant part of Westfield, the land use is housing, right? It's residential, which is good because that means that if we get all these homeowners involved in thinking about climate proofing their yards, we can make a big difference. Whereas my town of South Plainfield, we have a lot of industry also. That's harder to change, right? That's harder to change. So you're worried, you're depressed, you're like, I'm just gonna go and have that double whiskey. So what can a worried homeowner do to respond to these changes that we know are coming? And so what I've done is sort of break it down into the different things that are going to impact our yards. And the first is that the hots are getting hotter, right? So our average summer temperatures are increasing. I know this from anecdotal qualitative observation because 30-odd years ago when I came to this country, we needed a window air conditioner for a few days in the summer. And last summer, I think it didn't turn off for a couple of months, right? And so just from how we're living our lives and the number of days over 90 or the days over 85, we're seeing these increases. So we can see this. This is the average maximum temperature departure from like the last decade of the last century normal. So right, if we are on average, with the whole of New Jersey should be gray. The only part of New Jersey that's gray is Cape May. And then the more intense the color, the more departure from normal. And where is most departed from normal is Central Jersey, right? Middlesex County, Morris, Somerset, right? The bulk of our central New Jersey. So when we break that down further and we don't just look at average temperature, if you're a gardener, the temperature day and the temperature at night are two very different things, right? And they're going to have different impacts on plants. So this is the, again, from the state climatologist, this is the observed number of very hot days. Now, I'm from Scotland. If it's 71, it is a very hot day, I think. But these, I think, are days over 95. So number of days over 95, and you can see that there's a lot of very hot days, but the number of very cold nights is definitely decreasing if this is the average line, right? And so as we think about plants and over this coming winter, let's just call it winter because that's the months we're in, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the climate is going to do, but over winter as we pour over our seed catalogs and our plants catalogs, we tend to use those, average or, minimum and maximum temperatures in our plant choice, right? So another way to think about that, this map shows how temperature, not actual temperature, but how vulnerable different communities are to these changing hot temperatures and less cold nights. And what we can see here is that here's our urban northeast, here's Patterson, here's Newark, here's Clifton, right? All of our cities, the communities least able to deal with climate change because of poverty and because there's huge numbers of renters are going to be the most impacted. And so, this heat vulnerability index shows that the places where the temperature is going to change most in New Jersey and the places where people are going to feel it most are not necessarily the same. So here's from your plant's point of view, right? So New Jersey, the simple way to think about it is New Jersey in 2050 is going to be more like North Carolina is today, right? And so, think about gardening appropriately, right? That's 25 years from now, we're going to have a climate, that more approximates communities 300, 400, 500 miles south of here, right? So, we're going to be 4 to 6 degrees warmer than current conditions. This is in Fahrenheit because even though Celsius is for the rest of the world, I know Americans are in Fahrenheit, right? So 4 to 6 degrees warmer than current conditions, which we've already said are about 4.5 degrees warmer than conditions we've experienced since 1950. And temperature matters a lot for plants. If you're a plant physiologist, right, the difference between 35 and 30 degrees is the difference between not losing your plants that are not frost hardy to frost, and getting your plants, nibbled by frost because your plant's tender tips were not able to cope with those cold temperatures. And likewise, the difference between 83 degrees and 90 degrees is huge from a physiological point of view. And so now we're going into sort of more in-depth botany to understand what's actually happening to our plants. So this is Morris County temperatures. You can see the annual temperatures increasing, but then let's focus on Union County, right? So this is actually December, and the reason I picked December's temperatures, so if you don't have your glasses on, so maximums are in red, averages in black, and minimums in blue, right? And so we see December temperatures, and what we're seeing is this rise of December temperatures. So it's not just that the nights are getting warmer in summer, right? The nights are not cooling off. Our winters are not getting so cold. And that has implications for plant dormancy. It has implications for plant pathogens. It has implications for plant stressors. And so when we're doing our winter planning and we pour over that hardiness map, the hardiness maps are based on the minimum, temperature, right? Is this, when I look at whether lavender is hardy here, can it stand, 5 degrees or minus 5 degrees, right? It's looking at that minimum cold temperature. And what we think is it actually might be more useful as we start to mitigate and become more resilient to climate change, not to think about the minimums, because we're going to experience those less frequently, but to look at the heat, the maximum temperatures. And that's because when, if you know that you're going to have a cold spell, you can go out and you can throw a couple of blankets over that really, tender thing that you really shouldn't be growing in your garden, but you're doing it anyway because you love it, right? But it's harder to mitigate for those hot temperatures, right? And so we've already changed our plant hardiness zones 3 years ago, 4 years ago, sometime around COVID. Those years blend, but we are seeing that the zones are creeping northwards. So plants that 20 years ago were not. When my husband was young, back in the Ice Age, when my husband was young, his father would go to huge lengths every winter to cover up the figs, right? The fig trees that every Italian has to have in their garden. And the crepe myrtles might die back to the ground, if we got a hard frost. We don't need to think about doing that anymore. Our figs are doing fine. Our crepe myrtle is 25 feet tall, right? And so, just anecdotally, we're seeing that it's not that cold. We're not getting those extreme cold temperatures anymore, but we are getting those extreme high temperatures. And so what's happening in a plant is that, and you guys all know this, but just as a review, plants have all these little pores on the underside of their leaves, the stoma. They open up to allow carbon dioxide in so that the plant can photosynthesize and make sugars. But as they open up, waters through evapotranspiration can also leave. So the waters are getting sucked up from the roots through the vascular system of the plant, and then out these little pores. When temperatures go into the 85, 86 Fahrenheit range, the stomas start to be like, it's getting a little dicey here. I'm going to close up, right? If I close up, no more water can escape. This is great, right? Plant might wilt, right? If you don't water your tomato plants, they might wilt, right? If it's super hot day, they might wilt. But that's okay. They're going to revive either in the cool night, or when you water them, or when you give them some shade. And what is also shutting down is that evapotranspiration, just like in humans, right? When you sweat and that sweat evaporates, your body cools. Evapotranspiration cools the plants and keeps them out of plant stress. And when we have hot days and they shut up shop, yes, they're not losing any more water, but they're dealing with that heat stress, right? And so, this is that same style of graph, but looking at the warm nights. So nights over 70, those would what I would call not sleeping nights, right? If it's over 70 and you don't have central air, right? 75 for sure, but over 70 is a little bit uncomfortable. And for plants also, because normally drop in nighttime temperatures, the plant can start to respire again, it can start to transpire again, and it can sort of reset the stress. So the way I figured out to think about this is to sort of, compare it to humans, right? If you go in the sun a little bit, and this is not what you need to be hearing from a Northern European who just burns, but if you're a human in the sun, you go in for a little bit, you tan. You stay there for too long, you get sunburn. And you stay there for longer, you end up with heat stroke, right? I just go straight to the burn, never the tan, right? Plants stressed in the sun are having a similar set of things happening. First, the plant wilts. Then, if they continue to have to exist in this stress condition, the sun might actually cause leaf scorch. That's physiological damage. That's not going to reset, right? That can't be undone. And then if they continue to be in these difficult conditions, you get tissue death, the plant is weakened. And just like humans, when we're weakened, right, from stress, we're more susceptible to pests and pathogens and diseases, and so are the plants. So, dealing with increasing heat in your yard is something that you have to be a little bit, as we say in Scotland, a little bit canny with, right? So plant choice is key, right? Native plants we know, and we'll talk more about specifics later, but native plants, they're going to be able to deal with those adverse conditions more readily than some of the more like hot house ornamentals that are going to be, oh, I'm just so hot, I'm just going to expire, I'm just a little bit stressed. But the other thing we need to think about is how we can get those plants out of physiological stress. And the way you do that is by carefully planning in some afternoon shade. So, thinking of something that gives your plants some relief, right? So it might be that you're looking at, oh, my conditions are full sun. I'm gonna go for plants that love full sun, but maybe I'm going to do some shrub or tree plantings that, because of the way I've laid everything out, will give some afternoon shade, or the building or my garage will give some afternoon shade, right? And it gives that plant a chance to cool off, start to transpire again, open up those stoma, and start to cool off and undo the stress on the tissues. Another thing is to sort of consider making your beds with spines. We know if we're Doug Tallamy acolytes, and I think there's a lot of Doug Tallamy acolytes in the room, if we are Doug Tallamy acolytes, we know that shrubs and layers are really valuable for all the beneficial species. But they also, that layering, as well as being great for pollinators, also is layering the shade, right? So you can start to give some shading, maybe in the heat, in the peak of the growing season, not in the beginning of the growing season. And so, thinking strategically that way, where you can offset this plant stress, it is super helpful. And then, oh, there's a word missing there, but dealing with when plants are under stress and they're more likely to get diseases, dealing with the disease that you see, not what the guy in Home Depot is trying to sell you, which is the pesticide or the herbicide for everything. So using integrated pest management to manage those stresses and to try and offset them by, giving your roots lots of shade, giving your plant lots of water, seeing if there's any micronutrients that might be missing to sort of offset some of those stressors. And keeping moisture in the ground is key. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But that right plant, right place, sort of year-round, not just when you're choosing perennials from our plant sale and you're like, oh, well, I'm, part shade, part sun. Plan for the future when, even if your conditions are part shady, maybe you need to choose plants that are more sun-loving because they're going to be able to cope with the tougher conditions that we're going to expect as we move forward. So here's a little palette. So starting with New Jersey tea, this is Eastern red cedar, Eastern redbud, straight species, not cultivars. We'll talk a little bit about why that is in a minute. This is black huckleberry, winged sumac. This is Pennsylvania sedge, used as a grass replacement. This is a plant I know as kinnikinnick or bearberry. This is a plant that grows in Scotland also. It's a circumboreal plant, so it's a low-growing brown creeper. Spotted bee balm. This is ninebark and portulaca or kiss-me-quick. Not native to New Jersey, but native further south. And that's the other thing we need to start thinking. And I know there's native plant folks here, but when we start thinking forward, we need to start looking at what are the plants that are native in Virginia and in North Carolina. And those are the plants that are going to become more at home here in New Jersey as we move forward. So, climate resilient yards mimic natural systems. And this is Natalie when she was very little. Now she's 20 years old. So my yard has changed a lot. But a climate resilient yard has plants that have deep roots so that they can, eke out water wherever it is. Native plant roots tend to go much deeper into the soil. They have those layers so that the canopy is shading and intercepting sunlight and heavy rainfall. So if you go to the Pacific Northwest and you stand underneath a forest in the Hoh rainforest or the Quinault rainforest, hardly any rain, even in a torrential downpour, is hitting you because it's all being intercepted and softened in those layers above you. And so we need to start looking at intact New Jersey forests, which are sometimes hard to find, right? We're an past agricultural state, so many of our forests have regrown, so they're heavily laden with invasives. But looking at the layering and structure of a natural system and trying to mimic that in our yards. And the woodies, the shrubs, and the trees are how in great part we get there. So I've had a very depressing week because the neighbors, I've been working from home a couple of days this week, and the neighbors on either sides have been removing trees. No. And it's just heart-wrenching. We don't have a shade tree committee in our town. We do technically have tree removal ordinances, but it just says 1 for 1, right? And removing a mature oak tree that's been growing since 1948 and is not diseased and is about 35 inches in diameter and replacing it with, a Bradford pear is not the same, right? So one of the things that we need to do, as well as thinking about planting good plants, is the not removing of these trees, which are so beneficial for us. So iTree, which is put out by it's an online resource by the U.S. Forestry Service. You can actually take any tree in any place in the world, or I think it's maybe in North America, and you can calculate the amount of carbon that tree is storing, right? And so I did it with a pin oak that we have. So the pin oak that we planted 12 years ago, it was probably a couple of years old when we planted it. It's now 6 inches in diameter. It's about 30 feet tall. It's offering shading benefit, and it started doing that within sort of 5 or 6 years, right? It's going tall, but it's offering shading. When I plug that tree species and the diameter and my location into iTree, it tells me that tree has sequestered or stored away through photosynthesis 150 pounds of carbon, which sounds amazing, right? Not so much, because that's equivalent to about 12,000 miles of driving. I have to fly home to Scotland a lot, and so it is not the same as flying home to Scotland. So I can, when I book my flight, I can offset my carbon, and what they're doing is planting some trees somewhere. But you can calculate what's going on in your own yard by, identify the tree, an iNaturalist, Plant Seeker, or a book. Library, there's lots of identification guides. You could identify the species, you measure the circumference, and from that figure out the diameter, and then plug that information into iNaturalist. And you can start to lobby, look, this tree is sequestering this amount of carbon. This tree, never mind its pollination value and its, value in the food chain, it's sequestering carbon, but it's also shading your house. And so with careful planning, trees planted close-ish to our houses can start to reduce our heating and cooling bills. Our cooling bills in the summer by 12 to 18%. Because of the shade they're giving, they're stopping the house envelope from heating up so much. Excuse me. And that's the reason why these trees were planted not that far from buildings. Now what happens, especially in our neighborhood, is the tree surgeon or the insurance company come around and say, we need you to cut that tree down because if there's a hurricane, that tree could fall on your house. I mean, like, if there's a meteor, it too could fall on my house, but if the tree is healthy and has been well maintained, chances of that are pretty slim, right? And so what's happening is we're removing these mature trees that are providing all of this shading and cooling, all of this deep water recharge, and replacing them with, pom-pom topiary, right? And so, one of the things that you can do that is the most effective is choose trees that are native to New Jersey and south, rather than New Jersey being at the southern end of their range. Plant them strategically and think about what they can do for you. We sit under the maple tree that shades our patio for 6 months of the year. That saves us heating and cooling, or cooling at least. So using your tree planting, but then as you plant, as the tree is still small and easily accessible, thin it so that you're not going to have the issues that the branches are heavy close to the house, right? Thin the tree, lighten the load, take its tree health seriously, so you get the tree guy in at first sign of anything. Make sure you're watering it. We don't water our yard all summer long, but I am watering our evergreens, our hollies, our euonymus that we have, because we can't afford to lose them. I don't want them to be stressed. I don't want there to be root die-off, so that the next big storm, they will be weakened and more susceptible, right? So being strategic with what you plant and how you care for it when it's young. We are trying to negotiate with our neighbors to, all of us, the 6 houses on our section of the street, plant a couple of shade trees on the Hell Strip, right? Because in summer, we're all vying for the parking space above or underneath the maple tree across the road from us, because that's the coolest place in town, right? And so, thinking forward, what would planting trees that can shade and choosing them well can be really effective. Okay, so that's the, hot's getting hot, now the wets are getting wetter. So we know that New Jersey precipitation is already between 2.5% and 10% higher than it was 25 years ago. And we know that that is likely to increase. Funny to say while we're in the midst of a pretty severe drought, but only 4 years ago, 2020, it was the wettest 12-month period that ended September or October 2020 was the wettest 12 months that we'd had on record. 2019 was one of the wettest years. So it's again going back to that amplitude. This is your precipitation. So this is Union County precipitation over time. So the red line is the smooth line. And then, the amplitude, again, we're seeing, these big storms that dropped 4 inches or 6 inches, or a Hurricane Floyd, 25 years ago that dropped 14 inches of rain, right? No amount of garden preparation can prepare you for that kind of storm, right? We're not thinking about how do you manage a Hurricane Helene in your yard without there being catastrophe. What we're trying to think about is how do you manage those 2-year storms or 5-year storms, which are getting more frequent. And so, in New Jersey, this is from the Blaustein School. Their predictions are that those 2-year storms are going to increase by as much as a fifth to a quarter, right? So those heavier 2-inch rainstorms in 24 hours increasing in frequency. if we look at precipitation totals from Hurricane Ida, right, there are parts of New Jersey where we have 9 inches, 7 inches, 8.5 inches of rain, right? If any of you tried to drive on Route 22 during Hurricane Ida, right, huge catastrophe. And so we can, as a community, as a statewide community, we can protect the floodplains and not build more on our floodplains than we already have, protect that acreage and manage it well so it's really receptive to holding water. This is the exit point from the headwaters of the Passaic River. So Millington Gorge is where the Passaic River leaves in Long Hill Township. And you know, we see that there's more flooding in winter because the trees are not sucking up water, but there's places for that water to go. The houses in Long Hill are built way up on the top of the hill, right? So even in a Hurricane Helene type situation, there's not a lot of houses in the upper parts of Long Hill. Once you get into Berkeley Heights, New Providence, game is totally different. There's houses built right on the floodplain. Those houses are going to flood, you know, repeat and frequently. And so no amount of garden preparation is going to stop that from happening. That's a more global ordinance and planning. This is this is the gas station on 22 in, is it Mountainside or maybe Scotch Plains that blew over during Hurricane Ida. This is Patterson Falls in with the Passaic River coming over after Hurricane Ida. And this is, I think it's either Cranford or Westfield. It's Union County, right? And so that volume of water that we're getting, not in the hurricane, but in the just heavy thunderstorm, what happens to it depends on what our land surface is. And what happens to it in our yard depends on what our yard's surface is. So impervious cover, either blacktop or concrete, permeable surfaces like riverstone, technically grass, but we'll give a little asterisk there, or wildflowers, where when it precipitates on that surface, the water can soak in. If it's hitting this surface, all it's going to do is run off, right? So when it rains in our town centers, all the rain gets conduited right away to our storm drains, or storm drains lead into our streams. And what we're seeing is this mass erosion. This is actually Penns Brook, which is in Bernardsville. It's a stream that we've worked on for a long time. If you know Bernardsville, it's behind the Kings. But we can see a 10-foot cliff that has been eroded during heavy rainstorms, because what happens is the rain comes like a fire hose and it has a lot of power and it's getting there too quickly. And so what we need to think of, this is your community, so here's Westfield. We split Westfield into these different sub-watersheds. Sorry, Clea, but the Railway River sub-watershed, 38% impervious, right? So this is the percentage of impervious cover based on the land as a whole. But great news that there's lots of capacity for change in the Railway River sub-watershed in Westfield, right? Those houses, if they start thinking differently about how they manage stormwater, can make a huge difference. So we need to get rid of this like water away, conduit it away as fast as possible mindset and slow the stormwater that's flowing across your property. No, we don't mean flood your basement, have water hanging around in places where it's dangerous, but managing water into garden beds or into areas we've created that allow us to have it soak in and not hit our storm system as quickly as it does currently. So disconnecting downspouts. This is Madison. This is called the 49 acres. It's behind the high school. It's a big recreation area. They put in a rain garden and they did a curb cut, which allows the rain to flow in and fill this rain garden. Normally you never see pictures of rain gardens full, but here's one that's actually full to the brim. Water is actually pooling here because the rain garden is so full because this is just a deluge. But having more surfaces like this in a sub-watershed, especially one prone to flooding, can reduce this kind of impact. So again, we're sort of mimicking those natural systems, and we're allowing water to soak deep into the ground and then shallowly infiltrate, where it will slowly move downstream and go into the streams and water courses. and very little of it is running across the surface, right? That's what's happening in a natural forest. So I've shown this picture before several times, but this is my backyard, this is my neighbor's backyard. You have to pick out which is mine and which is the neighbor's. So our neighbor, they never walk in their backyard, they never venture there at all. Their son rode his ATV like all around the backyard for about 8 years. The lawnmower guy is in there with his 4-wheel mower, no matter what the weather conditions. And so we had a big nor'easter, March 2017 or 18, something like that. And they had a duck pond for weeks. They had this water sitting because the soil was so compacted. Grass, not blacktop, but so compacted that it just sat on the top. There was no place for it to go. In our yard, the water, there's no difference in topography, so the lake should have continued. But in our yard, we have a lot of organic material in the grassy areas. We have beds that are filled with organic material, and they're acting like giant sponges. And then these are all native shrubs here and in the back and around here, whose roots are penetrating 8, 10, 12 feet deep, breaking up our heavy clay Piedmont soils and allowing water to sink in. So even though we have the same amount of rainfall, it's not sitting on the top, right? So it's not causing flooding, it's soaking in, and then it's going to be there for the next few months for when we have our next dry spell. So that's just the difference between compacted and uncompacted soil, right? Soil that's been squished while it's wet is almost like concrete. It's almost as impervious as concrete. So one thing you can do is decompact your soil. When you decompact the soil, and the yard guy is going to tell you, oh, I can do that for you for a few $100s. But you can do it yourself. You can either rent a little hole plug cutter, which takes out these little soil plugs and allows water to infiltrate down. You can use these machines that sort of look like little claws. And what you see is then the grass roots start to be able to penetrate much deeper. And so, A, they're more drought tolerant, but also water moves down the side of the roots and can actually go further away. So looking in your yard, where are your pathways? My pathway to the washing line is really compacted. That's something we're going to hit this fall, not until we get some rain, because the ground right now is all like concrete. But decompacting your grass, adding in organic material to amend it and soften it over time can really make a difference in how much water it's able to store. Also, not taking the grass right up to the base of trees, excuse me, that's beneficial for pollinators. We know there are those soft landing areas, but they're also beneficial for areas where water can recharge. Here you can see there's actually a downspout that we're taking one of our gutter downspouts that used to just go into the black top of the driveway, and now it's going into the bed and deep watering this tree. So I don't need to spend my New Jersey American gallons watering that tree in a dry spell. And then, another thing is to take some of your lawn areas and turn them into low maintenance beds. I don't say no maintenance beds, because people often think that native plants are no maintenance, but they're not. They move around, they grow, they spread. But creating areas that, when we moved in, our whole yard was lawn, and we've been slowly taking pieces away. So here's an area that we weren't really using, we didn't need it for the kids, so putting in some shrubs and some perennials allows those deeper roots to recharge. And then being, activist about actually adding things that can turn your house from a net loser of water to a net holder of water. So rain gardens, a huge win. They're inexpensive to put in. There's huge amounts of information from the Native Plant Society, from Rutgers, about how to prepare your soil, how to do them. There are often grants available to do them in community spaces or schools where they can then act as a demonstration. But the big idea is just that you're creating a shallow depression that will fill with rain that is coming from some sort of runoff, maybe the edge of a patio, maybe a gutter, maybe the edge of a parking area. that rain is going to fill up the bathtub and then slowly soak away because the soil has been softened and loosened and amended with organic material and planted with plants, again, right plant, right place, planted with plants that will either sit with more water or sit on the drier berms. The plant sale that we offer every year, we always offer a rain garden kit of perennials, but there are many resources, and there's some at the end of the talk where you can find more information about what would do well in a shady rain garden, a sunny one. But you know, consider they don't need to be huge. They can manage just the area that, you know, is the downspout at the front of your house that's going straight to the street. You divert it into a linear bioswale rather than a rain garden, and they can actually collect many thousands of gallons and keep them out from the storm drain. This is actually Rutgers stormwater assessment. This is your town hall. They recommended, you know, bioretention systems and that would take these drainage areas and take the drainage and put them in. Don't know if that's happened. This was 2020, but I think the one in Smacker's Park happened, right? So, you know, managing some of your runoff and acting as a great demonstration for people living elsewhere in the community. We do the same thing with students so that students don't feel like there's nothing that they can do. They're learning about climate change. They live in Patterson. Their school is 100% blacktop. But even if there's not money to put the rain garden in, they can learn what these solutions are. And sometimes once we've done the planning with them, we're then able to find money and put rain gardens in. We've put 6 in around Patterson. So we're sort of solutions focused. Thinking of other parts of your yard that are currently impenetrable to water and making them more pervious, right? Either permeable paving. We need to get our driveway redone, right? The blacktop is ruined. It's sort of falling apart. And so instead of just putting blacktop down, we could look at putting more permeable surfaces down that allow water to soak in. The cost can be, for a small area, the cost can be more, but there are other solutions like you know, natural pavers and pavers with grass, where the cost works out to be about the same as blacktop, but the environmental benefit is huge. So one of the things that I would recommend you do before it gets, if it ever gets cold, before it gets cold, is take some time and actually make some plans of your yard. You can use Google Maps to do an aerial view, and then sort of look at your yard with a different lens, right? Where are the sunny and the shady areas? Where are the areas that, if we ever get rain again, are wetter and drier? Go out with your umbrella and take a look. Where does water gather, and where could you make it gather if you did a little bit of conduiting? Where are the low spots where the wetter loving plants are going to do well? How much of your property, it might surprise you, is impermeable and how much is permeable? The roof line is typically the biggest thing in a residential home, but that roof line, which is impermeable, if you're taking that runoff and putting it into a rain garden, can switch over to becoming a net permeable surface. Look at the stormwater features you have, you know, that are taking water away, and decide if there's any of those you might be able to disconnect. And look at your existing trees with a really hard eye. Are they native? Are they healthy? Can you keep them? Will they be alive long term? And what else might you be able to do to supplement them? And then, you know, decide what are the areas that, you know, they're the areas that we need to keep beautiful because our neighbor complains if we let the grass grow there, and those should be marked also. And then what are the areas that might have potential for your climate adjustment areas? So you're looking at your yard and planning with a totally different lens than you normally would, because now I'm looking at where's the really sunny areas? Oh, how could I cool those down? Rather than looking at, you know, where can I put the rose bush? Where is this foundation planting going to go? And just to prove that it's not just for homeowners managing climate resiliency, this is the property that GSWA owns. It's 75 acres in Harding. And this is after Ida, I believe. But we did a huge restoration there in 2020 where we purposefully connected the river to the watershed a little more so that water would stay there, and it does very well. But we've had to harden up the trails, we've had to lift things up. And so as we think about changing climate and more rain, we might need to think about, every time it rains, my mulch runs off, and we're getting more of the storms where that happens. Maybe I make a switch, maybe I make an infrastructure change. Okay, and then finally, sort of the dry is getting drier. And this is where we're at right now, right? This was 2022. This is the slide I used last year where we were, so the categories are no drought, abnormally dry, moderate drought, severe drought, extreme drought, exceptional drought. So if we look at the West, like if we look at Colorado or Arizona, their colors are often in the reds. We were just in the dark yellow in 2022, last year super wet, and now this is this week, right? This is this month, so the drought is worst in the Pine Barrens. That's why they're on full fire alert. But even in central New Jersey, we're seeing drought. We're in an official drought. That means no open fires, no fireworks, right? These kinds of things are going to become more common. And it's because there's this increasing mismatch between when we need water and when we're getting water. So we're getting a lot of rains when the ground is already saturated or it's not the growing season, and increased drought now in the September-October period. So we need to start thinking about ways that we can mitigate that drought with plant choice, with understanding more about the water needs of our plants and managing them more carefully. So research from New Jersey American, and I think you guys are probably all in New Jersey American's water area, but 50% of the average New Jersey homeowner water use from New Jersey American is used for turf and landscaping. So that means we're taking water, we're treating it to drinking water standards, and then we're putting it on our plants. I pay a lot of money for water and I want to pay less, right? In a more drought-prone climate, water conservation has to be elevated up into a more important part of our yard sort of thought process. So, how you're watering. My neighbor is watering his lawn every day. Still, it's dead. Like, it's been dead for a while. It's brown. He's still watering it because his sprinklers are on. They go no matter what. They even go during the rain because they don't have a rain sensor. A rain sensor is about $12. It is not expensive, right? Like, we need to alter that mindset. So, if you have a landscaper, they work for you, right? People will often say to me, the landscaper won't do it. I'm like, they work for you. If you ask them to skip a cut because they're going to kill your lawn if they cut it short in the middle of a drought and expose all those grass roots to full sun, they need to do it. If you ask them to lift the mower blade up so that the sward of grass is a little longer during dry spells, they should do it, right? They often are telling you what they want to do, but you're the homeowner, you tell them, right? So things like grass cycling, getting, your, instead of them taking away the clippings, getting them after the first cut to mulch, or if you cut your own grass, as we do, buy a mulching mower, and it leaves that organic material in the soil. It's organic material that makes the ground more sponge-like. It's soil amendment, so it's slow-release fertilizer. And it's also allowing your grass to get shaded in those all-important summer heats when we want the roots to be protected from plant stress. Watering healthily, we often overwater our yards, right? The average is an inch per week. How do I know what my sprinklers are giving? Put a coffee can underneath your sprinklers. See how long it takes for an inch of water to gather in the coffee can. Then you're done. You really want your plants to make these deep roots. We tend to baby our plants, right? We want them to be not stressed, just like we baby our kids sometimes. We want them to be not stressed. We need them to be tough. And so we need to water infrequently and deeply. And that way they'll develop those deeper roots to survive those drier periods. And then know your soil, right? Know, what's your soil hungry for? What are your plants hungry for? Because, fertilizing incorrectly can actually cause more stress to the plant. It can cause them to put on a burst of growth and be sucking up more resources than we really have water for them. Soil tests are cheap. You can also go to the extension. Many of the county extensions will test your soil for free. Your environmental commission might even have a Earth Day thing where they'll have free soil tests. And as my neighbor has not learned in 15 years, do not fertilize before a rainstorm. It does not work. So, thinking of managing the droughts, we need to start thinking about different plants that are more like the plants that grow in the pine barrens or in the dunes in the beach areas of New Jersey or further south. So things like, this is black-eyed Susan, butterfly weed, this is lyre-leaf sage, this mealygrass, I think it might be, and then pussy toes. Pussy toes is really drought tolerant. These are all super sun-loving, drought tolerant plants. But there are lists everywhere. Native Plant Society has them, Bowman's Hill has them, we have them. There are many places where you can go to find plants that will do well with less water. Here's a few more. So prickly pear cactus, New Jersey's native cactus, loves it right now. This is the best year of my plants, 15 years, because we're in a drought, right? So there's many species that can be tough, whether they're perennials, but we need to start thinking of that switch from annuals that are water guzzlers to perennials, which once they've established their roots don't need supplemental water. Switching from perennials to shrubs, or from ornamental, high energy, high maintenance shrubs to native low maintenance shrubs. Or switching from cultivars, which are genetically similar, to wild species where there's some genetic diversity. And there'll be one plant in your 20 that might thrive in the drier conditions, and it will grow and set seed and spread. Here's a couple more. This is redbud we talked about earlier. This is bayberry, which is a dune plant, and this is witch hazel, which I have in every presentation because it's the best plant in the world, and it should be in everybody's garden. So, okay, you're depressed now, like, told you all this bad news. So let's just summarize what can you do when you're climate proofing, right? So, what do we mean when you're climate proofing your home and yard, right? We're thinking about allowing gardens to adapt to these changing amplitudes of expected weather. We're thinking of reduced inputs, that's reduced water to keep your garden going, reduced electricity that the plants can help you use if they're planted smartly, reducing inputs like pesticides and herbicides, which can also stress plants that are already drought stressed, increasing the passive cooling inside your home and out by using plants wisely, and increasing the land's capacity to store and manage runoff from stormwater. I would say that that's something that we all could make changes, and if everybody in the room conserves 10% of the water that's hitting their yard as a storm, that's tens of thousands of gallons that aren't going into the Raritan or the Rahway River. Changing your landscape components to adapt to changing conditions, so thinking shrubs and trees rather than perennials maybe, and planning early when your trees are small so that you're reducing the liability and risk from these increasingly catastrophic events. And then the most important thing I would say is planting lots of different things in your yards, because if you plant 15 different species, some are going to love it, some are not so much. And in your particular conditions, the plants that are going to thrive are the ones that you're going to want to plant more of. And so by using natives, which are cheap, and you can get genetically diverse plants, you can have, sort of like you throw them all in and you see which ones are going to do best. So there's lots of things we can do. It's easy to feel like, the weather that we're expecting and the conditions that we're experiencing are sort of have us at their mercy. But we need to start thinking of sort of forward planning to think of what's coming, because, it's real, it's bad, scientists agree, we need to do something about it, and we can all take part. Okay, so I'll take questions if anyone has any.
All right, so
Hi.
My name's Elizabeth, and I want to thank you, Hazel, for
Depressing you?
well, you brought me low, but you're leaving me high, so that's pretty good. And I just wanted to do a shout out for the Native Plant Society. We started a Union County chapter like 3 months ago.
Yay.
So it's kind of baby in its startup, but we really appreciate partnering with the Green Team of Westfield. So thank you, Lois, for your mentorship on getting things started. And I really wanted to, did people find out about this through the Native Plant Society? Did anybody learn about it? A couple handfuls? Okay, awesome. Great, I'm glad that you're here. So I'm gonna turn it over for questions. And maybe we can use the mic and I'll ask you to be my person. Thank you, Hazel.
No problem.
Yes. Who has a question?
Hi, good evening. Should we clean the leaves? I know from the grass, yes, but then usually it goes to the street and then they take to the conservation center. But I always think, should I leave them in my grass?
So there's a couple of different answers there. One is leave the leaves in as many areas as you can, because many of the beneficial insects and pollinators that are in your yards are overwintering in them, and by leaving them there, they're going to be present in the spring when they go from their dormant stage. So what we do in our yard is we clear the leaves from an area of grass that we're like our way to the washing line. We clear those, but we just blow them to the side, and then after the first heavy frost, we actually go over the leaves with our mulching mower, and they reduce down into nothing, and then we throw them onto our beds to act as mulch, because as they break down, make really great organic material that's easily incorporated into the soil, whereas some of the mulches that we top dress our beds with are, like my neighbor is using rubber mulch. I mean, it's like, here's this, like, it is water holding, so it's helping the grass stay, the soil surface stay moister, but leaves do that really well also. So the other piece of that is, if you're expecting rain, you should all know where the nearest storm drains are. And in urban areas, it's super important, but even in neighborhoods, clearing the leaves from the storm drains. There's just an article today in NewJersey.com about fires coming out from storm drains because dry leaves, and then somebody throws the match. But clearing leaves from the storm drains, or that will flow into the storm drain and block it and cause flooding, yes, for sure. But I don't want to give the DPW this valuable free organic fertilizer and mulch that I get. So we mulch it. We used to, when our kids were little, we would blow all the leaves onto a tarp, and they would jump in the leaves and do the mulching for us. Don't do that anymore. But yeah, I would be tempted, leave as many as you can, especially in a drought. The grass is already gone. It's really just for aesthetic reasons that you're blowing the leaves off, or the whole of my neighborhood today is getting ready for Halloween. No leaves shall remain on any piece of grass, right? Yeah.
Well, about those leaves, it's one of nature's great mysteries. Where do the leaves go? If you just leave them sit, don't rake them, don't even touch them. Right. Somehow, 6 months later, they're gone.
Yeah.
5 months later, they're gone.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So this is my question.
Uh-huh.
I'm having a little cognitive dissonance. About the drainage thing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like your neighbor's yard where the water collects. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We want a place for the water, but I know the soil is compacted. That's not good.
So you want the water to collect. So this is one of the misconceptions about siting of rain gardens. People will often site a rain garden where water already collects in their yard. Not what you want, right? The whole idea is that you're disconnecting that water, which has come from your roof and would go to a storm drain, and having it deep infiltrate. When it's just sitting on top, it's not real. It means it's not perfectly infiltrating, right?
Yes, but it will go down. It will disappear. It will disappear.
So that that area prior to that, I should take a picture of the non-flooded state, but that's just long grasses which have very short roots. My point is that the water sitting up on top there isn't benefiting any plants. There's no plants to benefit. They have, one tree in their yard. In our yard, the water has already recharged and is available for all those plants to transpirate. Yeah. So, yeah, I understand your point, but yeah, no, you don't want to have water sitting 2 weeks after the storm. Right. Right.
His problem is that he's a collecting point because he has a forest yard. The properties around him have swimming pools and impermeable
Yes.
backyards.
Mm-hmm.
So he is effectively draining for like 5 different.
So that is an issue, and we have friends in Madison who have had to deal with that actual issue, that there's not a pipe leading from their neighbor's house to their house, but by flow and by gravity, all of their neighbor's yard water is running off into their property. And so they actually went to the town and said, this is not so. You are supposed to manage by law, by rule of law, you're supposed to manage the stormwater generated on your property. It's not supposed to be being shipped over the hedge to the neighbor's yard.
These yards have cut down the trees.
Yep.
And they have put in impermeable
Yep.
patios with swimming pools
Right.
that fill out the whole part of their backyard.
So part of the issue there, and part of the responsibility we all have, is being being the observer for your town. Is your town passing variances? When in Chatham 15 years ago, when I was first at the Great Swamp, many people were purchasing small houses in Chatham, knocking them down and building, bash and build, right? And the new house had a much, much larger footprint, so it's covering the lot with much greater impervious cover percentage. And they would be 15% over what they should be, but then they would ask for a variance. And depending who was in town, maybe they would get their variance, maybe they wouldn't, right? We started attending meetings. We had a whole committee that was involved with Chatham, looking at every application and making sure that they were meeting the stormwater rules. We would, be able to go in and advocate, and the variances stopped being passed because the town has to realize that, they're looking at things sort of in this isolated way, but stormwater, is a community problem. And so if this house and this house and this house are all increasing their impervious cover, the one that's downstream is going to be the one that floods.
Yeah, the key word is the commons.
Right.
We're all live in the commons.
Right.
And
Right.
we're not doing enough, and we're doing
That's
too
for sure.
much in the wrong direction.
Right.
And more of these towns, especially suburban New York and New
Yep.
Jersey, have to wake up and manage trees and restrict cutting them down
Right.
willy-nilly and putting impermeable backyards and
But
building
you
houses
need,
that are
so, Montclair, for example, is a sustainable Jersey gold platinum Uber town, right? They're doing all the things. They bought the most number of native plants from our plant sale. Their environmental commission doing amazing things. The town cut down, I forget the number, 15, 16 mature oak trees to put in turf fields, right? It looks from the surface that you're replacing open space with open space, but one is not like the other, right? That impervious field, we had a member who's part of the environmental commission in Montclair going out every day and shooting the temperature on the turf field, and it would be 140 Fahrenheit, where your little kids are playing soccer, right? Instead of the shade and the cooling and the evaporative cooling and the deep roots of those oak trees. But yet Montclair, doing all the right things, joining all the, signing on to all the green pledges. So you need people who are prepared to be activists and sort of stand up for this. I don't mean they're necessarily throwing paint against the building activists, but at least, putting towns' feet to the fire and saying, if we want to deal with climate change, we need to be doing it consistently, and that means dealing with stormwater and dealing with, tree ordinances and those kinds of things. Yeah.
I just have a question
Yeah.
about the AHS heat zones, the new.
Oh, like yeah.
I have looked everywhere for information about plants that go with that, that match that map. So I'm in Monmouth County.
Yep.
We have, we're number 4, I guess.
Yep.
Is there any place that I can find even a little bit of information?
I can, if you give me your information afterwards, I will find out where that is. But, I think what we need to do is if we were 6A, you need to be sort of looking at the next zone down. I think that's the way, in broader terms. But I think we need to have that more broadly adopted. Most plant nursery catalogs still use the hardiness zones, and they need to not be, they need to not be. And that's consumer pressure to say, what's the heat capacity of this plant rather than the cold capacity.
Because the Connect, a couple of us have wanted to get that.
Uh-huh.
That apparently doesn't do well with the hot summers.
It grows really well in the New Jersey pine barrens, and they get that's hot.
That's good.
So I guess it depends on your soil conditions. So Knick is also bearberry is the other name for that, but it's it's a great sort of ground cover. So it may just be that it needs the right soil conditions, and in addition, pine barren soils are super well draining. I think it does not like to be wet. It can't have water holding.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Just real quick, where do you find the storm water regulations?
On your town website.
Yes.
Under what though?
Okay, so hang on.
MS4, so to this point, so Cranford, Westfield, all towns in New Jersey had to adopt new stormwater management regulations. There are a few towns, and I believe Cranford is one of them, that actually have enhanced over the state minimum. So in Westfield, we're looking at any disturbance that's under 500 square feet is going to have to go to the zoning board for exception, and if it's too much, there's going to be fines. And as Hazel said, the law says you have to keep the water on your property. So that's why Green Team, Native Plant Society, we want to have more programming, like teaching you how to put in green infrastructure, like the rain gardens you saw, bioswales, to help homeowners know how do I keep it on my property, because that is the law now. So
one of the
stormwater management
resources.
is a big thing in our towns.
Yeah, so I put on here the Rutgers Impervious Cover Assessment for Westfield, the Rutgers Rain Garden Construction Manual, and the Native Plant Society also has a rain garden manual, and then the information that Westfield has on their pages. They have all sorts of fabulous information on their green pages, but it's information about leaving the leaves, information about the rain gardens that you put in. One of the things that I would say is the way that we replicate what we've learned from working in Paterson is that simplifying the species you use so that you can sort of template the rain garden or the bioswale, so that you can put together a pattern, a planting diagram, and say, if you're going along the side of your driveway, try this, right? This, we've road tested this. You don't need to do the work, and so that might be something that we could work, together on to sort of get. They exist, but just to make them easy for residents to find, so that you can get the plants, understand the quantities you need to purchase, and how to construct, and then you can start to leverage them. Yeah. Question? Yeah.
Can you comment briefly on which laws indicate that we need to keep a runoff on our properties now?
Not specifically, but MS4 is the global stormwater rules. Yeah, that's why our organization is fighting a development that's directly upstream from the Harding property that we own, because the developer says that the water quality is going to be better after the development of 53 low-income housing units and condos than it is before. But our independent environmental consultants not so much. And then the new stormwater regulations came out, and we can say that even though Harding has approved it, we can say, you're not managing all the stormwater on your property.
So it's called MS4.
MS4.
So So we have to wrap up,
Yep.
but I want to first thank you, Hazel,
Oh,
so
no
much
problem.
for coming. There will be more programming coming both from the Native Plant Society, Union County, and the Green Team working with them. So I do want to tell you on September 12th, which is a Tuesday. Oh, excuse me, November 12th, there will be another seed collection workshop that Bianca and I will be doing at Sustainable Housing Summit, so that will come out to you from Native Plant Society. We have at the library in the past done cold strat workshop, which we would do again. We've done things on invasives. We're definitely going to do things on stormwater management. The Green Team and I know Cranford does a lot as well. And sustainable landscaping, which is near and dear to Elizabeth and my heart because I hate gas leaf blowers and they should, if you are here, you should hate them too. So we'll be talking about some legislation that's working its way through the state on that. So if you're interested in any of these things, either reach out and sign up in the back, information from Union County Native Plant Society or greenteam@westfieldnj.gov. You can get a hold of me. Mary?
Yeah, I just, there's gonna be, Unami Park, we are doing forest restoration and, removal of some invasives, and that's gonna be November 9th. So in